I'm Chloe, 34, female, and for most of my adult life, I believed my greatest virtue was my generosity. I now know that in the eyes of my family, my generosity wasn't a virtue at all, it was my function. I wasn't a daughter or a sister, I was an institution. I was the first national bank of Chloe, where the funds were limitless and withdrawals could be made at any time, for any reason, without ever requiring so much as a thank you. The interest I paid was my own peace of mind, and the currency I dealt in was my self-respect, and I have just, finally, closed my account. The setting for this revelation was, of all places, my nephew Leo's 8th birthday party. The backyard of my sister Olivia's modest suburban house was teeming with the squeals of sugared-up children. Balloons in primary colors were tied to every available surface, bobbing in the gentle afternoon breeze. My brother-in-law Mark was manning the grill, flipping burgers with the unearned confidence of a man who hadn't paid for the ground beef he was charring. My mother, Eleanor, was shuttling paper plates and cups from the kitchen, a placid, slightly strained smile fixed on her face. It was a perfect picture of domestic bliss, a picture I had almost single-handedly financed. This dynamic wasn't new. It had been solidifying for years, hardening into a family structure where I was the silent, invisible foundation. I was the senior financial analyst who worked 60-hour weeks, whose salary was a quiet, shameful secret among them, but whose fruits were enjoyed by all. The evidence was everywhere you looked. Take the car Olivia drove, for instance. A year ago, their old sedan had finally given up, its engine sighing its last breath in a cloud of smoke on the highway. Mark's credit was a wasteland, a casualty of his fleeting career aspiration and a general aversion to paying bills on time. Olivia, a stay-at-home mom who sold knit scarves on Etsy for pocket money, had no income to speak of. They came to me, their faces a carefully constructed mask of panic and despair. "We're stranded, Chloe," Olivia had said, her voice trembling. "How will I get Leo to school? How will Mark get to auditions?" So I did what I always did. I went to the dealership with them. I sat through the salesman's pitch. And when the financing application was inevitably rejected, I co-signed the loan. I knew then, as I know now, that co-signing was just a polite term for solely paying. The monthly payment of $450 was automatically deducted from my account. They'd promised to pay me back, of course. To date, I hadn't seen a single dollar. When I gently brought it up once, Mark had laughed it off. "Come on, Chloe. You know we're good for it. Things are just tight." Things were always tight for them. Then there was the dental emergency. Last fall, Mark woke up with a swollen jaw and a pain he described as epic. It was an abscessed tooth, a root canal was needed, and his bare-bones insurance plan, the one he had from his part-time barista job, considered it a cosmetic procedure. The cost was $3,000. He called me, his voice muffled by pain. "I don't know what to do," he'd whispered. "I can't afford this." My mother called me an hour later. "You have to help him, Chloe. He's in agony. We're family." So I transferred the money. No questions asked, no expectation of it ever being returned. I just did it. Because we were family. The examples were endless, a constant stream of small and large financial fires that only I could put out. A new water heater, a vet bill for their cat, Christmas presents for Leo that were always a little too extravagant. With credit card bills quietly forwarded to my address, I was the silent benefactor, the emergency contact, the financial safety net they had all grown so accustomed to that they no longer saw the net at all. They only felt the comfortable assurance that they would never truly hit the ground. The latest, and by far the largest, expenditure was Leo's school. He was a bright, sweet kid, and he deserved the best. The public school in their district was struggling, and Olivia had her heart set on a private academy known for its small class sizes and excellent arts program. The tuition was staggering, $20,000 a year. It was a sum that made even me, with my comfortable salary, take a deep breath. Olivia had presented it to me not as a request, but as a shared problem we needed to solve. "We've been looking at the Northwood Academy for Leo," she'd said over the phone, her tone casual. "It would be so good for him. He's so creative, Chloe. He'd thrive there." I knew what was coming. I waited. "The thing is," she continued, a slight, practiced waver in her voice, "we can't make it work on our own, obviously. We were thinking, since you love him so much," and there it was, using my love for my nephew as leverage. It was masterful in a cruel sort of way. I agreed. I wrote the check for the first semester's payment of $10,000 just last week. I put it in a crisp white envelope, along with a birthday card for Leo, and placed it on the gift table when I arrived at the party. It was the largest check on a pile of gifts that I had also, in one way or another, paid for. I stood there in the backyard, watching my family perform their happiness, and a profound weariness settled over me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the invisibility. They never asked about my work, my life, my own dreams or struggles. They saw my success not as a result of my sacrifice and hard work, but as a resource that was rightfully theirs. I wasn't a person, I was a utility. And I was about to be reminded of that fact in the most brutal way imaginable. The party hummed along with the kind of cheerful chaos that defines a child's birthday. Children played tag on the lawn, their shrieks of laughter punctuated by the pop of a burst balloon. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, sunscreen, and sizzling burgers. On the surface, it was idyllic. But for me, a subtle chill undercurrent ran beneath the warmth of the sunny afternoon. I tried to mingle. I walked over to a group of Olivia's friends, other young mothers from the neighborhood. "Hi, I'm Chloe, Olivia's sister," I said with a smile. They offered polite, fleeting smiles in return before immediately turning back to their conversation about potty training and preschool applications. I stood at the edge of the circle, an awkward satellite, for a full minute before drifting away. No one tried to include me. No one asked me a single question. My mother found me near the drink station. "Aren't you having a good time, dear?" she asked, her eyes scanning the yard, already looking for the next potential social fire to put out. "It's a lovely party, Mom," I said. "Leo seems so happy." "He is. Olivia did a wonderful job." She patted my arm. "You know, she was worried about the cost of the bounce house." I told her not to worry. I told her you'd understand. I blinked. The bounce house? In the corner of the yard sat a massive, inflatable castle, currently filled with about 8 tumbling children. Yes, she had to rent the big one, you know, to fit all of Leo's friends. My mother said it so matter-of-factly, as if my bank account was a community fund for playground equipment. She had volunteered my money without even asking me. I felt a familiar prickle of frustration, but I swallowed it down. It was Leo's birthday. I wouldn't make a scene. I just nodded. Later, it was time for gifts. Leo sat in the center of the patio, a paper crown slightly askew on his head. His eyes wide with excitement, he tore through the presents from his friends' first action figures, Lego sets, art supplies. Then he got to the family gifts. My mother gave him a new bike, which I knew she'd put on her credit card. Assuming I'd help her with the bill later, I had put a lot of thought into my gift. Knowing Leo's fascination with space, I had found a high-powered telescope. A serious one that was probably more appropriate for a teenager, but I knew he would grow into it. It was expensive, but I pictured him in the backyard on clear nights, looking up at the stars and dreaming big, and the cost seemed irrelevant. He opened it, his little brow furrowed in concentration as he looked at the box. "Wow, a telescope, thanks, Aunt Chloe," he said, giving me a sincere, gap-toothed smile that momentarily melted my frustration. But Olivia's reaction doused that warmth instantly. "Oh, Chloe, you always go so over the top," she said, her voice laced with a strange mix of admiration and disdain. She held up a lumpy, hand-wear-upon sweater from another relative. "See? This is what I love, something with thought, something personal." The implication was clear. My gift, because it was bought, because it was expensive, was somehow less personal. It was a transaction, not an expression of love. The fact that I worked endless hours to afford such gifts, that the thought behind it was to give my nephew a window to the universe, was completely lost on her. My contribution was, once again, reduced to its monetary value and then dismissed. Mark clapped me on the shoulder. "That's our Chloe," he boomed, "always the big shot." He meant it as a joke, but it landed like a stone in my stomach. I spent the rest of the gift-opening ceremony in a haze, the cheerful sounds of the party seeming to fade into a dull roar in my ears. I watched my family. I watched how easily they accepted my contributions, and how quickly they erased me from the narrative. I wasn't the hard-working sister who loved them. I was the big shot, the over-the-top provider of things, a function, a wallet. The final act was the cake. It was a magnificent creation. From a fancy bakery, a 3-tiered masterpiece decorated to look like the solar system. I knew for a fact it had cost over $200, because Olivia had called me in a panic from the bakery, saying she'd forgotten her wallet and could I please pay for it over the phone. I had. As everyone gathered around to sing happy birthday, I stood at the back of the crowd, feeling a million miles away. I watched Leo blow out his 8 candles, his face glowing with pure joy. For a second, I felt a surge of love for him that almost made it all worth it, almost. And then Olivia, holding a knife, began cutting the cake. She served Leo first, then my mother, then Mark. She moved around the patio, handing out slices on colorful paper plates. Finally, she approached me, a large slice of chocolate cake in her hand. Her smile was tight, her eyes holding a glint of something I couldn't quite decipher. It looked like resentment, and that's when she said it. The words that would shatter the fragile peace I had been paying for all these years. "The sun was warm, on my skin, but a deep, arctic chill was spreading through my veins. Olivia stood before me, holding out the paper plate with a perfectly cut slice of planetary cake. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. In fact, her eyes were cold, almost challenging. "Here you go," she said, her voice just loud enough for those closest to us to hear. Then she leaned in, a conspiratorial whisper that was meant to sting. "Buying stuff doesn't make you special, Chloe. You're just the family wallet." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and glittering as shards of glass. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. The laughter of the children faded. The buzz of conversation ceased. All I could hear was the echo of her pronouncement. "Just the family wallet." I looked at her, searching her face for any sign of jest, any hint that this was a poorly timed, terrible joke. There was none. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated condescension. Then, to my right, I heard a snort of laughter. It was Mark. He was leaning against the porch railing, a smug grin spreading across his face as he took a large bite of his own cake. He had heard her, and he approved. He found my humiliation amusing. I glanced at my mother, who was standing nearby. She had heard it too. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her own smile faltered. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I sent her a silent, desperate plea. "Say something, defend me, tell her she's wrong." My mother's eyes darted away. She looked down at her plate, fiddling with her fork. Then she looked back at me. Her expression pained but resolved. She muttered, so quietly I could barely hear, "Let it go, Chloe, just let it go. Don't make a scene, don't make a scene, keep the peace. Let them walk all over you, because rocking the boat is the greatest sin of all." My mother's lifelong mantra, and in that instant, something inside me didn't just break. It vaporized. It was the final, crushing realization that I was utterly alone in this dynamic. My sister saw me as an ATM, my brother-in-law saw me as a joke, and my mother, the one who was supposed to love me unconditionally, saw me as a necessary sacrifice for the sake of a quiet life. The hurt was a physical thing, a white-hot poker to the chest, but beneath it something new was forming, a cold, hard clarity. It was the kind of clarity that comes after a high fever breaks, leaving the world sharp and unforgivingly real. They were not going to change. They did not value me. They did not love me. They loved what I could do for them. I looked down at the slice of cake in Olivia's outstretched hand. The cake I had paid for, a symbol of a celebration I had funded. A peace offering from the person who had just insulted me to my core. Slowly, deliberately, I raised my hand, but not to take the plate. I gently pushed her hand back, forcing her to hold the cake. I looked her straight in the eye. "No. Thank you," I said. My voice was eerily calm. All the anger, all the hurt, had coalesced into a single point of pure, unshakable resolve. I turned away from her stunned face. I ignored Mark's fading smirk and my mother's look of rising panic. I walked not toward the gate, but back toward the patio where the gift table stood. Every head turned to watch me. The yard was silent now, save for the distant, oblivious chirps of a few birds. I scanned the pile of brightly wrapped presents until I saw it, the crisp, white envelope with Leo written on the front in my neatest cursive. Inside it was the check for $10,000. Inside it was my nephew's future, my sister's peace of mind, and my own complicity. I picked it up. The paper felt cool and definitive in my hand. I turned back to face them. Olivia was still standing there, holding the slice of cake like a forgotten prop. Mark had straightened up, his amusement replaced by confusion. My mother looked like she was about to faint. I held up the envelope. "You know, Olivia." "You're right," I said, my voice carrying across the silent yard. It was strong, it was clear, it did not shake. "Buying stuff doesn't make me special. It just makes me a fool." I looked from her to Mark. "So, good luck covering next semester's tuition," I said, my words precise and deliberate, because I just canceled the payment. And with that, I turned around, walked through the silent party guests who parted for me like the Red Sea, unlatched the gate, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. I did not look back, I just walked. I heard the gate swing shut behind me, the click of the latch sealing the moment in time. Then, behind me, I heard a chair scrape violently against the patio stones, and the sound of footsteps. Not walking, but running. Mark was running after me. The air outside the confines of the backyard fence felt different. It was the same sunny afternoon, the same gentle breeze. But stepping onto that public sidewalk felt like crossing into a new country. I took a deep, shuddering breath, my lungs filling with the sweet relief of freedom. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and profoundly lonely feeling. The envelope was still clutched in my hand. A flimsy piece of paper that represented the heaviest burden I had ever carried. Chloe. Wait." Mark's voice was breathless and laced with a panic he couldn't conceal. I didn't stop walking. I continued down the quiet suburban street toward my car, my sensible heels clicking a steady, determined rhythm on the pavement. He caught up to me, grabbing my arm. Chloe, stop. What are you doing? I stopped and turned to face him. His face was flushed, his eyes wide with disbelief and fear. There was no apology in them. There was no concern for my feelings, no remorse for his derisive laughter. There was only one emotion, pure, undiluted terror at the thought of the money being gone. What do you mean? You canceled the payment, he demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. You can't do that. The check is right there in your hand. It's a bank check, Mark, I said, my voice as cold and hard as a diamond. The funds are drawn from my account. I called the bank on my way here to let them know I might be putting a stop payment on a large check today. All it takes is one more phone call. His face went pale. Why would you do that to us, to Leo, to you? I let out a short, humorless laugh. This has nothing to do with Leo. Leo is a wonderful kid who is caught in the middle of this. This is about his mother publicly humiliating me and his father laughing about it. After years of me being nothing but your personal bank, it was a joke, Chloe, a stupid joke. Olivia didn't mean it, he pleaded. His tone shifting from demanding to desperate. She meant every word, I replied flatly. And so did I. You're ruining your nephew's life over a joke, he insisted, his voice rising. He's going to have to leave his school, his friends. Is that what you want? This was their tactic. The one they always used, make me the villain. Frame my self-respect as a selfish act that would harm a child. For years it had worked, but not anymore. What I want, Mark, I said, pulling my arm from his grasp, is to be treated like a human being. Not a resource, not a wallet. What happens with Leo's school is up to you and Olivia now. You're his parents, it's your responsibility, it always was. I turned and continued walking to my car. He followed, still sputtering. This is insane. You're being cruel, after everything we've been through. I reached my car and clicked the unlock button. I turned to face him one last time. My hand on the door handle. No, Mark, I'm not being cruel. I'm just done. I got into the car, started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving him standing on the sidewalk, a statue of impotent rage and panic. I didn't look at him in the rearview mirror. The drive home was a blur. My hands were shaking. But not from fear or regret. It was adrenaline. It was the aftershock of a tectonic shift in my own life. My phone, which had been silent in my purse, began to buzz and buzz and buzz, a relentless stream of notifications. When I finally got home and stepped into the quiet sanctuary of my apartment, I kicked off my heels and sank onto the sofa. I pulled out my phone. 12 missed calls from Olivia. 8 from my mother. A stream of text messages that painted a vivid picture of their escalating panic. The first from Olivia, what is wrong with you? You embarrassed me. The second, call me right now. The third, Mark told me what you said. You can't be serious, Chloe, this isn't funny. Then, from my mother, Chloe, please answer, we need to talk about this. You're overreacting. And another from Olivia, growing more frantic, you're destroying this family. How could you be so selfish? Leo was crying. The manipulation was so blatant, so textbook. It was almost clinical. They weren't sorry, they were angry that their ATM had suddenly grown a spine and walked out of the bank. I did two things. First, I made the call to my bank and issued the official stop payment order. On the $10,000 check, the customer service representative was polite and efficient. It was done in less than 2 minutes. Second, I blocked Olivia's number. Then I blocked Mark's. And then, with a heavy heart and a trembling finger, I blocked my mother's. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator. The silence was vast. It was terrifying, and it was the most peaceful thing I had ever felt. I had set the cake down. I had taken back the envelope. I had walked out, and for the first time in a very long time, I was completely, utterly on my own, and it felt like a victory. The peace of my self-imposed isolation lasted for 24 blissful hours. I ordered takeout, watched a movie without checking my phone for emergencies, and slept a deep, uninterrupted sleep for the first time in years. The silence was a balm, but I knew it was the calm before the storm. The next afternoon, the storm arrived. It didn't knock politely. It hammered on my apartment door, a series of sharp, insistent bangs that echoed through my quiet living room. I knew exactly who it was. I looked through the peephole. Olivia and my mother stood in the hallway, their faces grim. Olivia looked furious, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. My mother just looked exhausted, her face etched with worry. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. We need to talk, Olivia said, pushing past me into the apartment. Without an invitation, my mother followed more hesitantly, wringing her hands. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Olivia, I said, closing the door and turning to face them. Nothing to talk about, she scoffed, whirling around. Her voice was shrill. You detonate a bomb in the middle of my son's birthday party, humiliate me in front of all my friends, threaten to pull him out of his school, And do you think we have nothing to talk about? How could you be so cruel, Chloe? Cruel, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. You want to talk about cruel, Olivia, let's talk about cruel. Is it cruel to work 60 hours a week so you can have a reliable car? Is it cruel to pay for your husband's dental surgery so he's not in pain? Is it cruel to fund every holiday, every emergency, every single thing you need because you refuse to live within your means? I walked over to my desk and pulled out a folder. I had been preparing for this moment my whole life, I realized, for years. I had meticulously tracked my finances, a habit born from my profession. It also served as a detailed, undeniable record of their dependency. I opened the folder on the coffee table. Let's review, shall we? I said, my voice devoid of emotion. The car loan, $450 a month for the last 12 months. Total, $5,400. Mark's root canal, $3,000. The new water heater last winter, $1,200. Christmas and birthday presents for Leo. Over the past 5 years, because you always wanted him to have the best, roughly $8,000. That's not including the random I'm short on groceries $500 transfers, the credit card bills you've forgotten to pay, or the $200 cake you just served me yesterday. Olivia stared at the spreadsheet I'd laid out, her mouth slightly agape. My mother sank onto the edge of the armchair, looking pale. And now, I continued, my voice gaining strength, the $10,000 tuition payment. You add it all up, Olivia, you tell me who's being cruel. The person who gives and gives and gives until she has nothing left for herself, or the person who takes it all and then calls her a wallet. As a thank you, it was a figure of speech. She shot back, but her argument was weak, her eyes still fixed on the damning numbers on the page. You're just throwing money in my face. No, I said firmly. I am showing you the reality you have refused to see. Money is not just money. It represents my time, my energy, my sacrifices. That car payment is 5 hours of my work every single month. The tuition is over a month of my salary. I have been pouring my life into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and yesterday, you didn't just insult me, you spit in the bucket. I turned my attention to my mother. She flinched. And you, Mom, I said, my voice softening with a deep, cavernous sadness. You stood there and watched. You told me to let it go. Your desire for peace has always come at my expense. You taught Olivia that her feelings were more important than mine. You taught me that my role was to absorb the blows and keep quiet. You are just as responsible for this as she is. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. I just didn't want any fighting. She whispered, you didn't want fighting, so you chose injustice instead. I replied, there is no peace without justice, Mom. I have been paying for a fragile, fake peace for years, and the cost has become too high. Olivia finally tore her eyes away from the spreadsheet. Her anger had been replaced by a raw, ugly emotion I recognized instantly. Jealousy. It's just so easy for you, she said. Her voice thick. You have your fancy job and your nice apartment. You don't know what it's like to worry about every single bill. Easy? I almost laughed. You think this is easy? I don't go on vacations. I haven't taken a sick day in 3 years. I work while you're asleep and I work on weekends. I have sacrificed my own life to build this career. And you have the audacity to call it easy while you reap all the benefits and do none of the work. No, Olivia, the easy part was having a sister who would catch you every time you fell. And that's over. The three of us stood in the silence of my apartment. The unspoken truths of our family finally laid bare. They had come here expecting me to fold, to apologize, to reinstate the funds and restore the comfortable status quo. They had no backup plan. They had never needed one. Their backup plan had always been me, and she was no longer available. The confrontation ended not with a bang, but with a defeated whimper. Olivia, for the first time, had no retort. The hard evidence on the coffee table, coupled with the unshakable resolve in my voice, left her speechless. She and my mother left my apartment in a cloud of heavy silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind the wreckage of our family's foundation. The weeks that followed were the quietest of my life. I held firm to my decision. I did not unblock their numbers. I did not respond to the pleading emails that managed to get through my spam filter. I needed space. I needed to learn who I was without the constant weight of their needs on my shoulders. I started reclaiming my time. I went to the gym after work. I reconnected with old friends for dinner, friends who asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer. I bought a set of watercolor paints, a hobby I'd abandoned in college, and spent a whole Saturday painting by my window. The only person I had to worry about being myself. It was awkward and strange at first, like learning to walk again, but with each passing day, I felt stronger. The first crack in their wall of silence came about a month later. It was not a phone call or an email, but a formal, typewritten letter that arrived in my mailbox. It was from the Northwood Academy, A polite but firm notice addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Mark last name, which had clearly been forwarded to me. It stated that Leo's tuition for the semester was past due and that if payment was not received within 15 business days, he would be unenrolled. Seeing it in black and white sent a pang through my heart, not for Olivia or Mark, but for Leo. It wasn't his fault. For a moment, the old instinct flared up: just pay it. Make the problem go away. I held the letter in my hand, my resolve wavering. But then I thought of Olivia's sneer, Mark's laugh, my mother's silence. I folded the letter, put it back in its envelope, and placed it on my counter. It was their responsibility, not mine. A week later, a different letter arrived. This one was handwritten on my mother's familiar floral stationery. I almost threw it away. But my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Chloe, it began. I don't know what to say. The last few weeks have been very difficult. Olivia and Mark are in a panic. They are trying to figure out what to do. Mark is looking for a second job. Olivia is trying to sell more of her crafts, but that's not why I'm writing. I'm writing to say I'm sorry. When you laid out all those papers in your apartment, I saw something I had refused to see for a very long time. I saw how much you were carrying for us. I saw that every time I told you to let it go. I was telling you that your feelings didn't matter. I thought I was keeping the peace. But you were right. I was just being a coward. I was afraid of their anger, so I let them hurt you instead. I am so sorry, Chloe. I hope one day you can forgive me. Love, Mom. Tears streamed down my face as I read it. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. It was the first genuine acknowledgement of my pain that I had ever received from her. I agreed to meet her for coffee. We sat in a neutral cafe, a small table between us feeling like a vast expanse. She looked older, tired, but her eyes were clear. She apologized again, this time to my face. She told me that Olivia and Mark had been forced to have a real conversation about their finances for the first time in their marriage. They had an appointment with a credit counselor. They had informed Northwood Academy that Leo would not be returning next semester, and had enrolled him back in the local public school. Olivia is angry and hurt, my mother admitted. She feels like you abandoned her, but she and Mark are. They're starting to function. For the first time, I listened, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. I laid out my new terms. I will always love you, Mom, and I will always love Olivia and Leo, but the bank is closed. My support from now on will be emotional, not financial. I am happy to have a relationship, but it has to be a real one, built on respect, not on transactions. She nodded, her eyes full of tears. I understand, she said. And I believed her. Months have passed since that day in the coffee shop. The new normal is quieter, more distant, but infinitely more honest. The constant buzzing anxiety that used to be the background noise of my life is gone. In its place is a calm I am still getting used to. Mark found a full-time job. He works in the warehouse of a logistics company. It's not glamorous, but it's steady, and it comes with a decent paycheck and benefits. Olivia, faced with the stark reality of their new budget, turned her Etsy shop from a hobby into a small business. She attends craft fairs on weekends and has a surprisingly sharp mind for marketing. They struggle, they argue about money, but they are paying their own bills. For the first time in their lives, they are standing on their own 2 feet. My relationship with Olivia is strained. We speak on holidays and birthdays. The conversations are polite, surface level. The old warmth, the easy intimacy of sisterhood is gone. Maybe it was never really there to begin with. Maybe it was just an illusion I was paying for. In its place is a cautious, respectful distance. She no longer sees me as a wallet, but she doesn't quite know how to see me as just a sister. We are rebuilding from the ground up, and the foundation is still setting. My relationship with my mother is the most changed. Our conversations are deeper now. She asks about my life, my work, my watercolor paintings. She tells me she's proud of me, not for my salary, but for my strength. She is learning to be a mother to the daughter she has, not the peacekeeper she thought she needed to be. And Leo, he's thriving. He was sad to leave his old school, but he's made new friends at the public school. He discovered he's good at soccer. I see him every few weeks. We go to the park or the science museum. I helped him set up his telescope in the backyard, and we spent an evening looking at Jupiter and its moons. He didn't ask me for anything. He just held my hand and told me I was the best aunt ever. It was a gift more precious than any check I could have ever written. I lost the role of the family wallet, the one who was needed but not seen, the one who was praised for her generosity but resented for her success, and in losing that role, I found myself. I learned that my value is not determined by what I can provide for others, but by the respect I command for myself. The cost of this lesson was high. It cost me the family I thought I had, but it gave me the chance to build a real one, and the peace that comes with that, it's priceless. So, I have to ask you, the listeners, What would you have done? Would you have just let it go? Every situation is different. And I can only speak to my own, but I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family and for yourself is to finally say no.